Hey guys, welcome to the Game Dev Discussion Podcast. This is episode 7. This is the official podcast of the Dynasty Empire. I'm your host, Alex Beddoes, and this podcast is all about talking to the game industry people and trying to have a long-form conversation, understand what drives them, motivates them, and hopefully learn a thing or two so the newcomers to the industry sort of understand a few grey areas and hopefully learn a thing or two about the journey ahead of them. Today's guest is Clinton Crumpler, Dekogon owner and all-round badass artist. How are you, dude?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm good. Man, super excited to get you on. I just want to give everyone a heads up. We're going to split the podcast in half a bit today. So what we're going to do is focus the first half on yourself. Because to be fair, we could talk all day about, your killer portfolio. Like, you could take Dekogon out of the equation. There's still a ton of stuff we could talk about there. So we'll spend half of it on you, and then we'll move on to Dekogon because there's a ton of stuff we got to get through today. So,
yeah, that sounds great.
Dude, God, I tell you what, when I started researching you, there's one thing that stuck out to me. You've wore a lot of hats in terms of job titles. I mean, okay, just to reel a few off, we have texture artist, environment artist, instructor, Autodesk environment artist, mentor, senior environment artist, look dev artist, principal artist, creative director, and owner. You ought to be busy.
Yeah, a little bit busy for sure. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely like to stay busy. I enjoy all the different kind of like hats to wear because it just, I don't know. I feel like being able to I feel like anyone that's in the industry long enough doing art stuff, they're going to get to a point where, they kind of learn what they're doing and they kind of get to a point where they're pretty content with like I guess everything they've learned. So they're just like, okay, I kind of want to try something new. And I feel like always kind of pushing yourself and challenging yourself in new ways is the only way you're going to learn. And honestly, I feel like I get a lot of that through avenues that I wouldn't necessarily think that would be able the best way to do it. Like teaching, I find that it's actually most of the stuff I've learned through teaching has helped me significantly because there's always a student that will ask something like, oh, how do I make this weird shader that does this thing that's optimized for games? And I'm like, I'm not quite sure, but let me figure it out and we can figure it out together. And so you kind of do things that you wouldn't normally you get to do, right?
Yeah. I mean, I suppose that helps you. I always find so I've done a bit of teaching myself, and I think the fact that you have to so I find when you try to teach someone, say ZBrush, and you have a bunch of muscle memory things that tell you what to do. Like, it's almost like, so how do I do the select thing? I'm like, well, actually, I don't know how you do it. I suppose it's hold on, let me go to my keyboard, and for having to actually articulate stuff, I think helps you yourself understand what you're doing as well.
Definitely. And it kind of, just like the iterative process of being like, oh, how do I actually break this down for someone to understand how I'm doing it as well? It makes you more aware of the process. And also for the future, it makes you better at being able to change that or edit that process to do other things as well, right?
Yeah. Do you think, so obviously you've got you do a lot of stuff. You've got your art side of stuff, your entrepreneurial stuff that we'll get on later. Do you think you'd ever go back to the mentorship teaching side of things, or do you think it's you've got so much to do at the moment, you've got so much ahead in the future that's just not even on the radar?
I still teach at night. I still teach through CGMA, so I do a 10-week course with there every quarter, and it's basically on modular design and theory for games. And that course is through CG Master Academy, and basically it's like it's like a pre-recorded session that's you can watch the 10-week videos as each week's a different video. And then each week I also do a live Q&A with everyone. So I basically answer questions live. And then I also do a feedback session per every student for a little bit each week. So they'll submit their work and I'll take a look at their Unreal scene and I'll give them real-time feedback. And like I said, I really enjoy doing that. And that's definitely something I want to continue doing because I find that it really it just mixes it up. So I'm not just doing business all day. I'm not just doing art all day. I'm also just thinking about the process and how I'm going about it.
So yeah, you feel as if you have too many hours in your day, so you need to take up a few more. Just make something a bit
seriously.
More busy. Dude, that is
some days I
insane.
definitely look down and I'm like, man, it's already 12. How can this be? Like, what happened to the day?
Man, I just want to touch on your art a little bit, man, because
sure.
There's something it's kind of hard to put your finger on. One, you look for, if I see something in a thumbnail, you spot it as your work straight away. I don't know whether it's the camera angles you use or the fact that it's hyperrealism, but it's good hyperrealism, if that makes sense. I always say, I always find when you do a realistic scene, you're treading a fine line because you've got nowhere to hide. It's either going to look realistic, that's what you're going for, or it's not, and you failed your task. And I think that's why yours stands out so much, because you go for these realistic scenes. Look at just at the King wash mat. Like, it's a super realistic scene, and yeah, it's still so interesting. It's like the level of detail and the little storytelling elements you're doing. Like, are you aware of that? Are you aware of that when you start a project? That like, or does it just come naturally due to your art style?
I think it really we were having a conversation about this in the Dekogon Discord the other day. It's that like it just depends on how I guess you interpret what you like to look at visually. So say for instance like Lord of the Rings compared to like say Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is a bit more like with that whole recent like thing that came out where it was like too dark and everything like that, and like
Mm,
the lighting wasn't how people liked it. And then you have like things like Lord of the Rings where they've like color casted the crap out of it and then like made it like all the shields and all the armor has that really nice spec hit. And so I really like to me it's like I see real life every day, and so it's like I kind of want to be wild. I want to see those really nice spec hits. I want to have that
mm,
nice like color contrast that really just promotes like a visual interest. And so I get a lot of influence from things like Fight Club and like the
oof.
Nolan Batman films. I feel like
Yeah,
those
yeah.
are two really good films about like lighting because they do really dark kind of moody lighting, but they're still able to really show off like kind of like mundane scenes or places because like like with the laundromat it's like there's actually a laundromat scene in Fight Club that I look to a lot to kind of understand how they were kind of composing the scene and also like getting good lighting in there. And so I find that referring to those films and like other films that are very similar, you can kind of understand how to like take something like I said, really mundane and just kind of transform it into something a bit more visually pleasing with those like really nice spec hits, ways that you separate the color and lighting contrast, and just overall just understanding the composition a bit better.
So you like you. I guess that probably explains why you have such cinematic shots, and you are really heavily referencing and using film as an inspiration, and that's probably driving what your like final renders quite a lot.
For sure, yeah, and like I said, like the Batman films is probably definitely one of by far one of my favorite like shot for shot in general. Like just the way that you get these really like dark scenes, but they look so well lit and so like visible, like you can cleanly read everything in every shot because of how it's being lit with like artificial lights to make it a bit more like ultra real, right? Like it's not really realistic anymore. It's at that point where it's like kind of ultra real and
Yeah,
exaggerated to
yeah,
the point of like a nicer visual complexity.
yeah, like the hyperrealism type thing. I just want to
Yeah,
touch on one more
exactly.
thing with your environment. So it's something I've noticed, and I don't know if it's just you. I very rarely see people do this. So when so I'll actually use myself as an example. I made a scene recently, and I did an interior, and I focused on
Hmm.
interior, and then I was like, yeah, I'm gonna make this interior scene great. With a lot of your projects, you do like you tell an interior and an exterior story. So like the King Wash laundromat, you have the interior, exterior, and even like your
Hmm.
train scene. Like you've done this incredible train scene, and most artists, in fact, nearly all of them, would be finished at the train scene. But you keep scrolling down, and you even made the outside. Like, is that like
Yeah.
it's kind of great. I mean, you're creating like almost double the project because you can spend a whole project just making that outside scene, and like going back to the laundromat, like the outside shots alone are enough to be like, yeah, this is a cool project, this is a cool scene. But then you do the inside, and they itself hold up as its own scene. Like, do you always is that something that just is subconscious you just do, or is it like intentional that you want to do the interior and exteriors?
I think it's kind of two parts. I think the first is obviously like when I was going through school and like coming into the industry, I always had you kind of always have to think about like you as an artist is like an artist, but you're also a commercial artist. So anything you're doing commercially should obviously like be usable to anybody that's like getting the scene. And so I always found like trying to promote ways to have more flexibility to the scene. So if somebody wanted to use that scene and they wanted to replace the interior, or if they had this scene and they're going to be having this train in the subway tunnel, they want to be able to visibly see the outside at portions of it. And I just felt like that kind of influenced me to like push more towards like actually opening up and doing more aspects of it. And then the other thing is that I generally just like found that as I was getting different shots, I would find a composition that I really liked, and that would also tend to include the outside. And so I'm like, well, I could just not do this shot and I could do a different composition. But then I'm like, well, I'm kind of you're spending so much time on it. And it's like, why not just really give it that last like 20 or
Yeah,
30%? Because it's like so many artists will do that nowadays where they'll be like, oh, I've spent like 100,000 hours working on the scene. And then they'll go to like light it and render it. And then they'll kind of fizzle out a little bit because they're tired and they're just like, they're not really into it anymore. And so I find that that's actually the most important time and place to spend your hours, is because that's really what's going to sell it and make it look good in the end, is that time that you're putting into the lighting and the composition and like really getting that scene polished at the end.
Yeah, so we're talking about this in the Discord a few days ago. We're on about like not what's the most important stage, but what stage can kill a scene or kill a prop, and it's like you can have the best prop in the world with the best textures, and bad lighting will kill it. But it's
Easily,
flip of the
yes.
coin, you can have a pretty poor prop, but some decent lighting, you can either hide it or pick it up a little bit. So like it is great. You're right. People do sort of tend to fizzle out like towards the end because it's just like end of a project. Just get it done. I need to get it done. I want to get it finished, and you skip stages or you don't put as much attention to detail. So it's interesting you say that. It's actually, speaking of lighting, I don't know how I'd feel about this. That's why I want to ask.
Sure.
I've seen some amazing relights of your subway scene. Some really interesting stuff.
There's some crazy ones for sure.
Is it weird, seeing your work and people relight it? And how do you react to that? You're like, oh shit, I never would have thought like that. Or do you think, there's a reason I didn't do that?
I mean, I'm definitely flattered. Like when I see the relights, especially when it's something that's like better than what I was doing. I think it's always like super impressive. I'm always like, wow, that's amazing looking. First off, like I'm always really proud that all the lighting scenarios that people are doing on it work really well. So that means I stayed within that like PBR zone. I kind of did everything as I intended. So that's a good feeling for sure. It's like it kind of re-energizes me to be like, yeah, everyone really likes this scene. But then I think in general, just like the relights, I think it's really nice because like everyone's gonna have a different take on it. And I've seen a few of them that like I think one of the most interesting ones I've seen was there was like a neon one with like a really bright orange and a really bright blue. And I think they were using an Unreal character in there as well that was from the Paragon set. And man, I just thought that it looked so good and it was so interesting. And I was like, this is something I would have never done myself because it's just not particularly my like art style. But visually, I'm like really compelled by this. I'm like, this is a beautiful shot, and I think it really sells the structure and just like the overall like the body of the train really well with how it's set up. So like I said, it's really flattering and it's really fun to look at. Like I've enjoyed seeing all the different relights overall.
Yeah, it's just funny. I'm just like just sort of glancing through your portfolio or your art station, should I say? And the gears. So I just want to touch on the Gears of War thing for a sec. Obviously, a lot of your work is this hyper realism environment. Did you find it difficult working on the super gory, the swarm cinematics and stuff like that? Did you find that like unnatural or like sorry, not unnatural, but like not as comfortable as your other stuff?
Well, when I first started out in school, I actually was wanting to get into characters. And so like I spent a lot of time in ZBrush. And so I think knowing that definitely helped me out just throughout my career in general. Like I was better able to sculpt rocks and organics and everything else. And so I felt like when I got to the coalition and they asked if anyone would be interested in taking that role, I was like, yeah, that seems like a pretty challenging thing. I felt like I had made enough props, assets, textures that I was like, I wouldn't mind trying something new. And organic sounds like a kind of a cool way to kind of test my skills a bit differently. And so I really enjoy like shader process too, and when it comes to like Unreal and like working with like unique shaders. And so it was kind of a blend between like getting to work on organics and also getting to work on shader tech. And so I was like, this is perfect. Like it's something really challenging and it's something I'll enjoy. And so it definitely took a while to get the process down with how like between me and like my lead and my art directors and like the studio and how they wanted this that thing to look, because it was such a influential part of the game, because it's like basically that pod is everywhere throughout Gears 4. And so working with that was definitely, like I said, a challenge, but I think overall, like I was really happy with the results. And like, I felt like it definitely pushed me in a lot of ways that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do otherwise.
Yeah, 100%. You, so since you spoke about, having to do the different roles, there's a question I've got, and I'm not sure if you're going to be able to answer because it might be different for person to person.
Sure.
So you've gone through being like an environment artist, a texture artist. Okay, let's stick to the environment artist actually. So you got an environment artist, a senior environment artist, principal artist, look dev, and like now creative director.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just talk a bit about like how your role changed through them different roles? Like, because I don't think it's necessarily more responsibility going between, say, like environment artist to look dev or environment artist to principal. But just curious, like,
Sure.
What was that like?
Yeah, I think it's kind of it's in relationship almost to how I feel like the industry is evolving. Like I feel like when I first started out, you had studios looking for artists that were like prop artists or like could generally just make assets, and that was kind of good enough for like getting into the industry. Like you didn't really have a lot of like specific skill sets or like specialists at the time when I was first getting into the industry. And now it's kind of evolved where honestly, like you have so many different specialties. And so I think a lot of those roles came from what I particularly excelled at, which is like shader development or look development or art direction in general. And so that's kind of where I pushed myself like through my career and kind of creatively. But I think in general, like as you're evolving through those things, I think the biggest thing that changes with you as an artist is how you critically adapt and understand the process. So any environment or any proper in environment artist coming into the industry like generally has a decent knowledge of like I can make a neural map, I can make a prop, I can do this. But I think what separates that from a mid-level or a senior person is the critical thinking aspect. Is that like if somebody gives you a picture of something, a concept, and it's not a prop, it's like a full environment, or it's something that's really specific like a creature or something that's like more challenging, you as a senior or mid-level or even higher like a principal is it has the ability to understand and basically break down that concept into a executable pipeline. Whereas as a junior artist, you're coming in, you're not really quite sure how to go about that because you're still learning a lot of the process. And so I think that's kind of where I tried to make sure I was evolving creatively and like artistically and just like for career, is that understanding the process and pipeline a little bit more and more. And I think that kind of led to me also experimenting with like lighting in Unreal and like working with like material tech and all those other kind of aspects that I wasn't really aware of when I first started in the industry.
Okay, cool. So what would you say like the difference is then between like you've got like a senior, so we know what the difference is between a junior or mid-level environment artist to senior, jump up in responsibilities, knowledge, the ability to go through the pipeline quicker because you know what you want to do. What would you say like the main differences between like a senior to the principal artist? Because it's not quite a lead artist, I don't think.
Sure.
But like,
It's
what is that difference?
principal is kind of like it's kind of like a fork in the road when it comes to being an artist, when it comes to between like going from like senior to in the next step. So basically at a senior stage, you're like you basically know the process in and out. But then the next thing is that you either become a lead and you basically are doing much less artwork and you're working with the artists in your group to kind of promote understanding and then like learning and like making sure the kind of like artistic goals are achieved for the art director. Whereas a principal artist is the kind of path you choose if you still are really interested in doing art and you don't mind being a mentor to other artists on the team, but you're more focused on getting the art to kind of a stage where you're basically setting the process for others to follow. So you're basically making like the hero assets. You're working on things that are like establishing the art bar and quality for outsourcing. It's like basically you're taking the more art directive path over the managerial path with like lead role.
That's how you see it then. The lead artist is someone who's sort of managing the team and making sure everyone's on the same wavelength and timelines are met. And the principal artist is the guy setting the bar, setting the art style, setting the pipelines, and people follow. That's
exactly.
That
yeah,
okay,
exactly. So with the lead, you're going to be following the leads. Like if you're on a team, most likely you're going to be reporting to a lead, whereas a principal artist is someone you're like, I'm not quite sure how to do this. You would go talk to the principal artist to see if they have like maybe some tips or ideas on how to better complete that process.
You can sort of lean on a principal artist to be like, right, the lead artist doesn't need to really worry about him or her. He knows that they're going to do the hero asset, for example. It's like, right, I'll leave him to it. He's going to do a good job.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I can worry about everyone else. Okay, that's cool. That's interesting. And so you went that way then. So it's interesting actually. You said you leant more towards the principal art route, considering how your career's gone. With the entrepreneurial side and business side. Sure. It's interesting you went that way.
Yeah, I think it's mostly because like I do so much managerial and more management when it comes to Dekogon. So when it comes to kind of working my normal like work day when I'm working with either like Midwinter or whatever other client, that I have more of an ability to actually still produce the art, because that's honestly still my favorite part. Like I love working with all the artists and everything like that through Dekogon or through other contracts or through whatever place I'm working. But at the end of the day, I still really mostly enjoy the art process.
That's so good to hear. Like I'll be honest, I find you as a I'm trying to think the nicest way to say it. It's odd, I suppose, is the only way I could really word it. Because, I mean, there's people like yourself and Jonas who are artists who sort of started off on the side doing this entrepreneurial side of art, rather than you got artists who do mentorship and that's their sort of side hustle, and they mentor people. And I mean, to be fair, you do that too, actually, which is, I suppose you have a bit of everything. But then you get like artists who like double down on the freelance side of stuff, as their sort of side thing. You, with people like Jonas, sort of went the business route, like how can I monetize and turn my art into a business. And it's kind of weird. I don't really imagine artists. It's hard to come across people with that sort of mindset, I find.
Yeah, it's definitely,
is that
you kind of have
been in
to.
you? Do you think?
Yeah, you have
been in
to
you the whole time?
think a little differently for sure.
I mean, how long ago? So we're going to move a little bit towards the Dekogon story.
Sure.
How long ago before you were like, is it pretty quick? Did it come around like when you were thinking, okay, I could turn this into an asset store, into a studio? Like, when did the idea sort of start to formulate?
I think so. When I was building a lot of these scenes originally, like I had created them, and I just kind of dabbled in like working with like Turbo Squid or some of the other online marketplaces, and I was just making assets at home, and I was thinking like, like I'm making these assets, and I'm spending this time. Like it'd be nice if I could get some kind of return from it, so I could continue to live a good lifestyle and like still enjoy the art, like making the art like regularly. So I think that was kind of like what started me down the path to do that. And then as I continued, I kept making like bigger and bigger things, like bigger scenes and bigger assets. And then the Unreal Store marketplace came about, and that was a big change, I think, for me, because I started to understand like, oh, I can kind of do this commercially. And then I kind of saw an avenue to take it upon myself to I know kind of in the same aspect that everyone kind of likes to be their own boss, like I was like, oh, I kind of can push myself in that direction to kind of be my own boss, to kind of work with my own group of people that I like to work with. And so then I started picking up a few contracts here and there, and like doing some work with other artists to put towards the marketplace. And then I thought, like, there's so many artists out there that we've worked with, or I've talked with, or somebody knows that they're like, oh yeah, this person is great, but they can't get a green card, or they can't get a visa, or they can't come work over in the States or in North America. And so I was thinking like, there's got to be a way that we can like work with these artists, and then we can all produce work commercially, and we can all benefit from. And that's kind of where the idea spawned from, is like figuring out this kind of utopian artist built society that we can all kind of benefit from in the end of the day, right?
I mean, to be fair, you guys have been killing it. I mean, season 2's just dropped like, was it last week or the week before?
Yeah, so it's just coming
10
out
sets, wasn't it?
Yeah, so we got let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 sets coming out total. So, and I think each of them have about 3 to 4 volumes each. So like tons and tons of new content for sure.
And I mean, it's great. You know what? I find this insane. I don't understand. I can't wrap my head around how you do this. How do you maintain quality and that sort of Clinton Crumpler level of detail when you're working with so many artists? I mean, you can click on literally any one of these packs I'm looking at, and the level of quality is still there. You could tell they all belong together. How do you because you're only one man, like how do you maintain that quality and stuff across it? Do you have someone in charge of each project who sort of you rely on to make sure they do the quality check, or do you sort of have to do a write-off on every single project?
Yeah, so every single asset every single asset that's come in has definitely been checked pretty thoroughly by me. And then that was how it was up until this last season. So season 2, we have a new lead that joined us, and he was an artist from season 1 that was working on stuff, and he now helps me with about half the packs to continue to make sure that the kind of art is established, exactly the quality that we want. And so we kind of broke up the season 2 so that we could both kind of like get an eye on all the art coming through. And I still make sure, like, as we ship to marketplace, that I've seen pretty much every asset that we've shipped. But basically what we do is we have artists that either have been recommended to us, or or contacted us, or we found online, and then we communicate directly with those artists. So at the very beginning, we're working with artists we already know can show like good signs of like high productivity and really amazing art. Like we already know like the artists coming in are like talented artists, and so that's our number one thing. We make sure that our quality bar is high for the artists coming in. And then the second thing is, as those artists are working, they submit work, and then we check to make sure for consistency, we make sure like all the textures are set up correctly, and they're free of errors. And then that way, at the very end, as we're like either me or my lead Taylor is constructing the packs into the actual thing, we basically have made sure this asset is like perfect, like 3 or 4 times each, because we've reviewed and checked their work multiple times throughout the process. So there's always just like a checks and balances. And yeah, I agree. It's like it can be a bit tough just being between me and him, but I think that's kind of the key so far to keeping like a high consistency and like a high quality bar, is just making sure that we're always seeing the assets, we're always sharing within the Discord, or like as people are work in progress, they'll be like, hey guys, what do you think about this? And then everyone in the Discord is all other artists from Dekogon, so they're all also have their input to be like, yeah, I think you can improve this way or do it this way. And tons of artists have come forward being like, man, my quality bar was like good when I came into Dekogon, but like a year in now, like their quality bar is like shot up so dramatically, and they have like so much better work than when they first started.
Would you say then the majority of the artists who you have work on Dekogon are people, I mean, just as a percentage, is it 2070, 2080, sorry? Is it like, what is it in terms of people who approach you to work on Dekogon to you going out and I know this person, I want to go get them? Like, what's the balance?
Sure. I would say with the first season, when we first started, obviously like we were like a no name, right? We didn't have like a established like identity. And so when we first started, it was a bit tougher. Like we were communicating with people that we really liked, and we basically were like, searching for folks that we wanted to include in this. And so we kind of did like an initial pass of like achieving around like 50 people. And so that was pretty much all like us sourcing to those artists directly, being like, hey, would you be interested in this process? Like, here's how it works. And then season 2 came about, and now we're at about 150 to about 200 artists that come in and out of Dekogon regularly for either contract projects or the collab project. And so with that, now we have a lot of people that are either from recommendations from other artists that were already in season 1, or now like pretty regularly in my email every morning I wake up and there would be like 3 or 4 people asking like, what's the process to get into Dekogon? How does it work? Like, who do I email or who do I talk to? And I try my best every day to respond to those people and let them know like, here's the process. And then basically me and my lead and some of our like senior artists will basically look at their work, basically decide between us like, is there quality of the art bar you kind of deem worthy, and then we'll communicate with them to say like, yes, there's room for you here, or maybe check back in a few months when you have some more work complete. And so that's kind of the tentative process right now for getting it.
I don't know, have you ever considered this? So the reason people might contact you, and this is just from my observation, I haven't been told anything like this, so this is just me observing. Sure. I can imagine because of the quality of your props, they are perfectly game ready, they're high quality game ready assets. If you're a recruiter and you open up someone's portfolio and you see Dekogon, now that you are a name, I mean, I think the majority of the industry knows Dekogon. Do you think a recruiter like looks at someone's portfolio, sees, oh, they've got Dekogon asset, okay, this person clearly can work in a team, they can make the props, they check a load of boxes just by seeing that logo? Do you think that might be part of the reason you probably drive a lot of people wanting to, because obviously being a part of Dekogon is cool anyway, but I do genuinely believe that a lot of people in their heads are probably thinking, if I can get Dekogon on my CV, that just puts me in line with all the game studios, because it just shows I can do all this stuff, and that probably drives a lot of traffic towards you. I just don't know whether you thought about it that way.
Definitely, yeah, and it's actually like that's all part of our whole thing. Like I'm super open about promoting like either like getting jobs in the industry or pushing your quality bar, or like having those things in your portfolio that promote you be able to get that work. Because like I said before, it's like there's so many artists that like are super talented in Dekogon that just honestly just can't get that work visa to go work where they want to work. And so this kind of gives them that in to basically be like, it's almost like it's like an internship that you're paid for and that you enjoy, and that you're working with other artists like with the same goals. And so people are constantly sharing in our Discord like job postings for like full-time roles, anywhere, or like how to go about like getting green card visas and like all that kind of stuff. So like I'm really open with promoting like an open community to that those people can find the best use of like Dekogon in any way possible that promotes healthy growth for them as an artist, but also healthy growth for them as a person. Like I want to make sure that those people coming in are like enjoying their time, and if like it's only one season and then they get a job at like a studio, that's great. That means that I feel successful, that we've promoted that artist to that point in their lives where they can reach the goals that they're after. And we've had like, I can't even count how many artists that have come in that were basically like, I can't get a job anywhere, I'm having a hard time. And then they do Dekogon for a season. And then after the end of the season, they start applying places and they get 3 or 4 offers, and they immediately get that full-time role that they're after because they have that on their CV, like you're saying. And so I find that that's like, it wasn't at first an expected outcome of Dekogon, but it's one that I'm really proud and really glad that we have in Dekogon now.
Yeah, it is sick. It's great to see that sort of stuff happening, man. Like, it's another option, I suppose. It's another route. Like, because obviously the game industry gets so competitive. Like, I mean, you look on our station every day, it's crazy the quality you're seeing, and I see some artists who are like interns and they're like absolutely shit hot, and I'm like, oh god, like, and it's good to see the Dekogon obviously is helping people do that, because like I said, I do really believe a recruiter opens up a CV or a portfolio, and if they see Dekogon, there's like a ton of boxes ticked straight away right there. I'm gonna put you on the spot a bit here. I'm just curious. You don't have to answer, so don't feel obliged to answer. Do you have a favorite Dekogon set so far? Personal favorite, not down to quality, nothing like that. Just your personal favorite. Do you have one?
That's tough. I would say it's tough. So like I would say in season 1, I really enjoyed the mid-century set. So like it's probably not one of our best sellers because it's very specific to a particular art style or a look. But I find that it was the most like interesting art wise to me because of like the kind of shapes and curves and like the art language of like mid-century design. So I really like that one. And then in our new season, I really am enjoying so far the bank heist set we have going. And so it's basically
Oh
like
yeah.
all these really cool like robber mask and like different kind of like props and assets for like things you like drills and like hammers and things that you would use for like a bank heist. And so it's like a lot of really cool assets. And I feel like the artists have put a lot of really interesting like little kind of quirky details and to kind of promote the whole kind of like kooky robber kind of feel. It's like a sort of like the Nolan films, like with the whole Joker thing. It has that kind of vibe to it. And so
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying working with that one so far. And that one's just about to be released, I think, at the end of the month.
Dude, like, how do you actually choose your projects? Like you just said, the bank robber scene. Like, do you?
Sure.
I mean, is it you, or do you do market research and go, right, where's our gap? Do we do this, or do you leave it up to like, is it a communal vote thing? Like, how do you actually choose your next project?
It's a little bit of everything. So we have it on our site. So there's a special area on our website for like Dekogon artists to go and visit, and they can learn about details about the project, and they can also like vote for things that they think is interesting or projects they want to work on. But then not only that, we also like make sure we're doing a lot of investigation into like what's the current trends, like what kind of games are coming out recently, and what kind of trends are those what kind of assets would those games typically need? Because like you'll notice there'll be like a trend of games will come out. It'll be like all post-apocalyptic stuff, or all snowy post-apocalyptic stuff, or all like all like building or like high art deco or something like that. So we check out those trends, and then the last thing we also do is make sure to check towards like Unity and Unreal Marketplace to see like what's missing, like how can we fill those gaps, like how can we provide the content to those people looking for content, because often you'll see like why is there no like airplane set on like on like Unreal Marketplace? Like why is there no arcade set? Is it because it's not needed, or is it because it's just not there? And most of the time we find it's just because it's not there, and so we try to fill that gap when possible.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, also, I just want to sort of point out something because, like, I didn't know this, by the way, so it's cool to hear it. I mean, Dekogon isn't even just an asset store at this point. You're like you're a studio. You're an outsourced studio. You make games for people. So, like for you, example, you're doing full-time principal art for Midwinter, but that's through Dekogon. Like, your Dekogon's outsourcing to Midwinter,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
manpower to make assets. Like, that's, I didn't realize that. I thought you were purely an asset store. So hearing that you are an outsourcing studio, like, that's crazy. I had no idea. It's super cool to hear.
Yeah,
How
so
did that come about?
that's like that was more of a focus after season 1. So like I said, we're always trying to figure out ways that we could better promote, I guess, like artist outsource or artist outreach, so that we basically can get artists that are across the world that like I want to work on these games. How can we get them integrated in that? And so what better way than to literally just get them directly in contact or on projects with these different companies or VR groups or short films or whatever, like. And so we started to reach out to a bunch of studios and say, hey, like, here's our quality bar, like, what do you think about like working with us as like an outsource group? And so we actually had a lot of really good response really quickly, and it kind of blew up like honestly really fast between season 1 and season 2, with tons of contracts coming in. And like I think what's even better about that is that like the asset stores and marketplaces, it's profit share, and so the artists still get they get a part of the proceeds that they make from making the assets. But that's in no way a comparison to like providing someone an hourly wage for multiple months or weeks at a time. And so I think that was like kind of the next phase, to be like, how can we promote like a healthy lifestyle for these artists that are in areas like Cuba or Africa, or like areas that are harder to get those artists into the actual industry jobs in those seats. And so because of that, we're able to now like offer outsource support for different studios, and we're working with a lot of these studios on different games. And these artists that aren't even like remotely close to the studio are able to contribute their work and then get their name in that credit. So basically they're working on these games like all throughout North America and Europe and everything else, that basically they're part of it now. Like they're actually like full time, like we're like either contract work and then hourly. And so I think that was just like something that just kind of naturally evolved from like creating the assets in season one.
Yeah, I'd like to elaborate on something there. So it's obviously it's a weird subject. It's almost like taboo. People don't like to talk about it. So your Dekogon's obviously it's still in its infancy. It's still growing. How do you balance having to pay out? Because obviously there's like a lot of stigma in the industry about like freelance, because either whatever clients don't understand art, so therefore they feel like they don't get paid fairly or whatever. How do you balance that? Like being a small studio, paying all these different artists to do all these different things. Like, can you just go into a bit more detail about how that situation works? I think there's a lot of grey area around that, and it'd be good to sort of clear it up.
Yeah, of course. I think it's good to have transparency on this kind of stuff, because it just promotes a healthier understanding of like where we're at as an industry and where we're heading to, and how we can make sure we course correct as we're going forward. So like obviously there's a lot of issues with like the film industry where people are paid really low and they're worked overtime and a bunch of other stuff. And the biggest thing for me is Dekogon, and I discuss this with my lead all the time, is that we always try to find ways to push Dekogon in a way to promote that utopian feel for the artists, and including ourselves. And so the biggest thing is like when we started, I just needed to make sure that basically Dekogon had a base that we could continue to pay like lawyers and all these other people to make sure as a company we could sustain ourselves. But then the rest of it is essentially just like purely to the artists. So basically we're sending out like all the proceeds we're making from the marketplaces. A small portion that is going to Dekogon to sustain the company, and then the rest of it is going directly out to the artists based on their contributions. So that was the first thing we did to make sure that we try to be as fair with the people contributing to the sets as possible. And then when it comes to the contract work, we basically we're working with like either single A or double A or like VR studios, and so it's not typically a lot of like giant AAA studios. We have a few bigger contracts, but for the most part, we are working with these like mid-level studios, so that we basically are negotiating with them to get a good rate, and then I'll negotiate with the artists to be like, okay, what is it you're asking for, and how much do you want per hour, and then we'll kind of go from there with a negotiation of being like, here's how much I can provide, like, and here's how many hours you can work. And I my biggest thing is I never want any artist to work for free. I think that's pure shit. Like I don't do it, bullshit, and I don't think anyone should do it. And I think
do it for exposure, dude. That's the payment. That's the currency for artists. You do it for exposure.
I know, and I think it's so baloney. Like I just don't believe it. And like I'm a big proponent for not working like heavy overtime when it's not necessary, or anything like that. And so like I want to promote the same atmosphere and environment in Dekogon. So like any contract artist that comes onto the project, or anyone that's working on a project, I make sure they're paid what they ask for, or as close as I can get to it within negotiation range. And then I'm making sure that every hour they're working, even if it's like a redo or a rework, that's not free. Like that, if you had to do the time and you're doing the hours, then you should get paid for that time, regardless of who flubbed up what. And so we always work with artists, and even if it's an artist that's coming in, they're brand new and they're kind of like unsure about it, like it's their first freelance job, but they're really talented artists, we kind of work with them through it. We'll be like, hey, okay, like here's some like information, here's some like educational resources for you to use. And so we have a lot of like things that we've developed internally that are like educational videos, or things that we're like, here's how you can educate yourself on how to use trims, and here's how you can educate yourself on how to use tileable specifically. And so it not only like increases their understanding, but it also increases their ability or their workflow to be able to produce like better content for us. So it's kind of a win-win for all. And so we, like I said, we mostly just try to keep that utopian vibe all around, where everyone feels like they're getting in what they put, like, or they're getting out what they put in. And so that's really where we try to focus our attention.
Yeah. Do you, I mean, I can't imagine you do, but do you face the issue of like that whole crunch culture very often? I suppose with an asset pack store sort of thing, you can't have too bad a deadline, I'm guessing, or too harsh deadlines.
No, not too bad. Like I set deadlines for every things are due, and I understand, like, everyone's different. Everyone has their own individual issues. Everyone's got, different like social, economical classes, or, things going on where they're from and all this kind of stuff. So I understand all that. So I try to work with each artist on an individual basis. Like if they're like, I have all the assets high poly done and I need like a few more days to get this done, like I'm always willing to work with them on that kind of stuff. When it comes to contract work, it's obviously a little bit more strict, because like we're working with clients who need it by a specific time. But the thing is, what's really nice about Dekogon is that we have such a large base of artists that are working with us that we can kind of scale and scale up and scale down based on the contract needs. So let's say a contract comes in and they're like, we need this in 3 weeks. So it's like we'll just put more artists on it that are able to commit to it, that want those hours comparatively to like trying to stress out those ones that have been working on it from the beginning or whatnot. And then also like when it comes to the crunch, like typically like we'll ask the artist like like you've gone through a little bit of a crunch even though you were paid for all those hours, like do you want to break, do you want to continue to work on this? Like we just try to promote like everyone like to have good health and like overall like good mental sanity, because we don't want anyone to like stress themselves out unnecessarily.
I suppose you're in that sort of, you're in a quite sweet spot, because I imagine at this point you have one hell of a pool of artists to lean on. Past projects, current projects, future projects. So I suppose if you get to a stage where an artist approaches you and says, look, I've just crunched really hard, I'm burning now on my quality and where I want to be, you're like, yeah, fine, take a break, we'll go. You have people I'm guessing you could just pick up, drop in. You have your own, I imagine, pipelines and workflows and final presentation stuff. So you get people, you can probably plug and drop people in as and when you need to if someone approaches you with an issue. I'm guessing that's how it works.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it also it promotes for us in general, like as an outsource company, I feel like we're pretty powerful in that regard, because like say for instance someone's like, I want this specific thing done. We have such a pool of artists that are really talented and that have all these different specialties that if they're like, I need this kind of workflow done in this process and this engine doing this method, me and my lead can look together and we can be like, now who would be a really good fit for this? And so we're kind of fitting the artist to the project. And so not only is the client happy that they're getting like an awesome artist that specifically knows how to do the content, but also the artist is happy because this is something they enjoy doing. This is a process they like working on. And I find that pairing those two together promotes a super like great atmosphere between us and the clients and us and the artists, so that everyone involved is really happy with what they're able to do.
Yeah, that's it. I think that sets you aside like from your conventional sort of outsourced studios. I mean, I think actually thinking about it, like just thinking how powerful that is, you can have you can have every artist on the planet freelancing for you, not necessarily being paid hourly at that time, but just in a pool that you're like, oh, I need like a killer, I don't know, interior artist, and I have that guy who did that project, I'm gonna hit him up again. I think that really sets you guys aside from your conventional outsourced studio, which has say 20 in-house artists with varying sets of skills that work on something. You have almost an infinite pool of artists essentially if everything keeps going the way that it is and goes well.
Exactly, and that makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference on like say for instance like somebody's like, oh, we need to do foliage. It's like it doesn't make it so that the one person that knows foliage is like stuck on doing like foliage. If they don't want to do foliage, we'll find another artist that is interested in doing that. So it's like you kind of play to the artist's strengths and desires at the same time, but also it accompanies like the client's needs and wants.
That's so sick. I mean, just thinking about it, so artist skill sets, since you mentioned it, at the moment your assets, they are, if you're a level artist, level designer, say you're not an artist, you're a designer, you want design levels, you have these assets and you can create your levels, create cinematics, your lighting, all this sort of stuff. You have these asset packs. Do you have any plans in the future to maybe expand your repertoire? So you could have, character artists, material artists, VFX, animation. Like, is that on the radar for you? Because that's something that's like, oh, we don't need to hire an artist. We could have potentially, you've got like, I'm just going to look through and find like a pack, like the arcade pack, for example. Mm-hmm. Do you imagine like the arcade pack becoming something where it's like, okay, you're not just the arcade pack, there's a couple of characters in there, some sound packs, some VFX packs, a light rig maybe, like getting more disciplines into Dekogon? Is that something on your radar?
Yeah, for sure. And that's something I think we're going to focus on as we move forward into the next season or whatnot as well too. So right now we're investigating into materials and of course like texture packs, because that's always of use. And then we recently in this season, we did 3 sets of guns. So we did modern shotguns, modern handguns, and Western guns. And so that was kind of our first foray with like working with guns. And a lot of the artists in our group are really excited about it. And they did amazing jobs. Like those packs it's mind blowing because they're all 4K sick. Textures.
They are properly sick. They're so
super
good.
Polished. And so that was really fun to see that. And I think the biggest thing is that I think with any company, it's like I'm sure anyone's ever worked in the industry knows this. It's like if you're working with a lead or an art director or a company a studio head that doesn't actually know what you do, it's like a lot. It's like a dissonance there, right? Where you're like just detached from your superior as their understanding of your craft. And so my biggest thing is that I always want to be an understanding of like what people are doing and how they're doing about it and how I can better help them or provide them resources or connect them to someone that knows what they're doing. But I think now that Dekogon's grown so substantially, we now have these artists in our group that are very specialized that know those talents, so that now we're able to kind of push into those other skill set areas using those artists as more of like principal artists or like influential artists to the artists that are interested in trying that. So we might have somebody that's like, oh, I'm really good at foliage or I'm really good at like characters. And it's like all these other people that were like kind of timid or were interested in working with characters, but they weren't quite at that point yet. We now have that ability to kind of push and help them to reach that point where we can start working on those kind of aspects or those packs within Dekogon as well. So it's definitely on our radar. That's something we're definitely going to be focused on moving forward. As I find that, like you said, like lighting and like sound and all those kind of things play a big part. I think next season we're also going to be focusing on a lot more full environments. So you're going to get to see a lot more like large scale, like full environments that are comprehensive with like all the modular wall pieces and everything else. And so that's something we're also working on right now.
That tease though. That sounds sick, man. I'm super pumped to see that. I can't wait. I mean, I love seeing art drops from any studio. I mean, our class, like I said, it's like you get so there's the recent Division 2 art drop. There's a Spider-Man art drop, and one of the ones I do look forward to is the Dekogon art drop. Super excited to see them. I think one thing I'm trying to think how to like phrase this because I don't want to. So say we're going to move back a bit towards you. Actually, you were Dekogon at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's anything you did special to market yourselves? Because Dekogon sort of came out of nowhere a little bit, right? I mean, I don't like saying overnight success because took hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and days of work to get it. You're not an overnight success. It's completely unfair to say that. But to people looking in, you did sort of appear out of nowhere. And I'm guessing that's because you did some very clever marketing and publicity stuff. I'm just wondering, is there anything you did that you think is like, oh, this was really good, this thing I did here? Is that, is there anything you think you could give advice to others who are looking to market themselves as freelance artists? And it's like, oh, I did this and this is really powerful.
I think the biggest thing is just honestly like visibility. Like I think what happens is a lot of people are afraid to show either work in progress or what they've completed or like advertise themselves. And you'll see like if you're on 100,000 hours or 10,000 hours and you're posting on there and you're on Polygon or Polycount and you're on whatever other Discord group or website or anything like that, or Facebook even, like where there's a bunch of groups, you'll find that like the artists that are successful are the ones that are advertising for themselves to show their work. And so like I think the biggest thing that somebody told me when I was younger is no one is looking for you. Like no one's out there on the internet being like, I got to find this person. Like nobody cares about you. And it kind of sucks to hear that. But when you realize that, then you can really realize, okay, so that means I have to be my own self advocate. Like I have to like push myself forward into the industry to make myself known. And so I think that's kind of where I continue to kind of push Dekogon, is to make sure that like, all the artists are like, marketing with like the Dekogon logo, because it's basically showing like, we're part of this collective, and it has a firm understanding of like who we are and who the artists involved. And then like, pushing to Facebook, social media, other websites, making sure all the work is known. And it's like, I find that like studios that will like restrict their artists from showing off their work, it's like why? Like that's like free advertisement for you.
Yeah.
Like you're showing off, they're showing off their work. They're happy about it. They're showing off work that you're proud that they did for your company. It's like, why not show that off? And so I find that just having like an open door policy with just like being able to be very transparent with your artists, your audience, and your clients is just like, it promotes a lot of like interest in your company overall.
That's what I'd say. I think some of the bigger companies, maybe with the whole like not wanting to show publicly their work and stuff. I'm like, well, look at Dekogon's a great example. It's like artists, forget the actual customer side of stuff, people coming towards your game or your product. You being able to attract artists to your studio or your company, high quality artists, that's worth its weight in gold. So like it's like studios who are really like visible online. Like I know the Massive Studio recently posted on Twitter all the photos from their launch party.
Mm-hmm.
The public don't care, but people who play the games probably don't care that much about that. But other artists around the world, the best material artists in the world or the best character artists in the world, look at that social media feed and be like, oh shit, like that place looks great to work. I want to work there. Mm. So your company and your games go up with quality because you attract the quality talent. And I think that's probably one of the things that's worked really well for you guys, is that it's like you've probably attracted a lot of talent because it's like, oh, I want to be part of that Dekogon project. I want to be part of that, rather than you having to go, hey, really good artist, come work with Dekogon. You've got really good artists inboxing. You're like, hey, can I be a part of Dekogon somehow? And I think bigger companies maybe miss out on that a little bit.
I definitely agree, and I think it's like it works two ways, right? Like any artist that has the ability or the understanding that to email us and to contact us and reach out, those are the artists that are, and honestly, in the end, they're going to be the successful ones in the industry because they're taking it upon themselves to kind of put themselves out there to ask, to learn, to understand better about how to get into Dekogon or to other studios. And so you'll find that the people that kind of just sit on the sidelines that don't really say much or don't really observe are the ones that they miss out on those opportunities. And like you said, it's like it works both ways. So like us being more transparent with those people shows what kind of environment that we promote at Dekogon, which is like we try to make sure that we're really inclusive to everybody that's interested in doing it. Like regardless of where you come from, how you're raised, like what kind of art you're into. We just try to make sure it's like a really safe space for everyone to work and people, so they really enjoy working with us. And I think that's one of the key values of Dekogon is in general, is just making sure that everyone really enjoys the process as well as like the company and like the culture in general.
I just want to switch gears just a little bit. I want to just talk a bit about this. I've got a really good question. Someone sent me from the Discord, and I don't have an answer to this. By the way, I don't have an answer. And someone like you're a much cleverer man than me. I'm not going to say that now. So I'm hoping you're going to have an answer to me and to this. And if you don't, then you've let down my expectations. So, the environment art process is becoming like really automated already, and in the next decade, that's just going to get speed up more and more and more. Which skills do you think is worth like investing in that you just think this just won't be automated? Automation won't be able to take this particular thing. Like, is there any art skills you're thinking, right, if you're really good at this, automation isn't going to take that away from you?
Yeah, that's definitely true. Like I was talking to someone about this the other day. It's just like what I used to have to know in Photoshop, like all these tricks about blending and layer techniques. It's like now it's like solved half the time with like a quick layer mask in like Substance Painter or something, right? So like that skill that I had to use for so many years is now like basically automated, which is great because it speeds up my process. But it's also something that I had to spend time learning at that time to be able to get to where I am at. And I feel like it's like that way for any industry, right? Like especially anything tech, like it's always going to be super fast to speed up on like how fast like iteration is. And I think two things I always tell people when they come to me, they'll be like, oh, I want to be a prop artist. I'll be like, no, you don't want to be a prop artist. You want to be an environment artist or an artist just period. Because what a prop artist insinuates is that, or I guess like basically says, is that you just want to do really like low level stuff and you don't want to grow with a critical thinking or a critical idea in mind. And that's honestly what separates people that are coming into the industry as juniors, like we talked about before, to like mid-level, senior, principal, art director, blah, blah, blah. And so it's like, I think two things: composition and understanding of composition and lighting. That's a huge thing. You can't make that up. Like you can't automate that. It's like, no matter what, like obviously like we could always set up 3-point lighting, but no matter what, you're always going to have an environment that needs a special kind of lighting setup. It needs a special kind of like eye to know like what establishes a good cinematic shot. And those kind of compositional things are really important. And then the other thing is just critical thinking. Like, how can I solve this problem better, faster, or more efficiently? Because that's the kind of people that are like businesses are after. They want artists that basically know how to do their craft better and more efficiently, because that A, saves them money, B, makes their games look better, and C, like that just promotes like a better environment for everyone to be in, because you're all learning between each other, you're understanding the process better, and you're able to complete or construct a better looking game in general.
Damn, yeah, that's some good points, especially the art direction one, like composition. Like I don't know, you never know. The computers might take over one day and become more creative than us. It could scare the life out of us. But yeah, you got a good point there. I see what you mean.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be dead by then, so we'll see.
It won't be a problem anymore.
Yeah, exactly. That's future Clint stuff. I don't gotta worry about that right now.
Yeah, tomorrow Clint's gonna hate yesterday Clint.
Yeah, exactly.
I always wrap up my podcast with a question. I want to change it up a little bit because
Sure.
Normally I ask people, you know, if you had one tip for someone getting into the industry, what would it be? Now, we were talking in Discord the other day about, you know, how little we knew, like, say, 5 years ago. And I was talking about myself, you know, if I was 19, there's a ton of shit I'd say to myself, like, you know, to fix up, do this, because I've learned it the hard way. You could go back, talk to 19-year-old Clint. What's something you'd say to him to make his life a lot easier to get to where you are now?
It's like, sometimes it sounds kind of pessimistic when you say it, but when you think about it, it's really a valuable lesson. So there's three things, and that's one of them I just kind of said earlier was basically no one's looking for you. So like you have to be your own advocate. You have to be your own, like, basically like protector and like promoter. Like whatever you do is what is being done for you because no one else is out there doing things for you. So that's a big thing. Always like look out for yourself and make sure you push your own agenda forward to better enrich your life, to make your life better, your art better, your, you know, whatever you're trying to get better. The second thing is you can, one of my art directors when I was younger told me this. He said, you can never not turn something in, but you can turn in crappy work. So like that sounds kind of weird, but the thing is like someone is always going to remember if you didn't submit on a deadline or you didn't do anything to reach the point. But people are more forgiving if you submit crappy work on time, because then at least you can work to edit it or fix it or, you know, do whatever you need to do. But just not submitting, not emailing, not contacting the person you said you were going to contact, not coming through with whatever you promised to do, that looks extremely bad as you as not only an artist but a professional. And so I've dealt with a lot of artists like that have done that, and it's like it just kind of, you know, it kind of breaks the relationship between you two.
But I think it doesn't. I think it's the sort of, it sounds kind of cheesy, but it's like owning your mistake. Like if you turn in crappy work, it's like I can own this and I can be like, right, fine, I didn't do it up to the level I wanted to. I can learn from that. But I suppose if you don't hand it in, you're almost hiding from your mistake and you're not really owning it. So that's a really good point. And you know what? That's a good like lesson. I've never heard that, and I like it a lot. So I'm gonna put that note that one down.
It definitely helps. And then the last one would be is that always look out for yourself when it comes to working with companies. Like companies, like they're obviously they're established to make money for the company, for the investors, or for the owner, or whatever like that. Like obviously we've been talking about like how, you know, we try to promote the society and Dekogon, that we're, you know, trying to make all the artists happy, as well as, you know, Dekogon be sustainable. But like anytime you're working for like a company, just be aware, like don't go into it oblivious, being like, oh, the company has my best interest in mind, because sometimes they really don't. So you just need to be aware as to protect yourself, because there's so many. This is like a big thing right now with like layoffs and like people getting like losing their jobs regularly at the very end of production. And so you just be attentive and be open to the things that are around you, to know like this isn't a good situation. Maybe I should remedy this somehow. And how can I remedy this? Because there's been times where I've been laid off just like everyone else, but I've also left a studio right before everyone was laid off, because I was aware and attentive, and I knew that it was coming. And so like just be very aware of what's happening around you, and don't ignore the signs that things aren't in a good place. And if you're like basically working crunch every day and you're miserable, change your life. Like the only person who's going to change it is you. So like make the change for yourself, and don't be like, I just got to keep doing this because of what I have to do. No, make the difference and make the change. And so I think that's the other big thing I would have told myself when I was younger.
Damn, son, that's some knowledge being dropped right there. That's sick. Dude, all right, we're sort of wrapping up now. I've got to say, thank you so much. If anyone doesn't know, this guy's talking to us on his lunch break. The dude is like a machine. So I've got to say, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll get you back on again sometime. When the next season drops, we'll get you back on and we'll have a little chat about it.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, and I really enjoy it. It's always fun to talk. Sure.
Couple of side things. Firstly, TJ with the donation, £5 donation, bro, means a ton. It means a lot to me, and yeah, I'll keep going with this. Couple of side notes for people. The VOD will be up in a couple of hours. It'll be available on Spotify, SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. The links for them are all down below. And if you follow me on either our station blog or my Twitter, you'll be able to keep track of all the information and news for the podcast. And lastly, there's a link to the Empire Discord. Guys, if you're not already in there, get in there. It's a great source of critique and feedback and knowledge. I joined a couple of years ago and I haven't looked back since. It's really helped me come on leaps and bounds. But that's us done for today. Clinton, thank you so much for coming on, and I hope you're having a good end of your day.
Yeah, you as well, man. Take it easy.
See you, chat. Bye-bye.